Welcome to Coffee and Geography, where my guests and I geek out about the world and everything on it, discovering that we are all geographers in some way, shape or form. I'm your host, Kit, and my pronouns are they, them or she, her. So settle down with a brew, hit that subscribe or follow button, and enjoy the listen. Hello everybody, welcome to Coffee and Geography. Now this person's job title is graphic recorder. That is an understatement of a job title because what you do is amazing. And I've welcoming me today, Rebecca Osborne. How are you, Rebecca?
I'm very well, thank you. How are you?
Yeah. As we were just talking before we got on the call, you know, about the rain is finally here because we're both in the same part of the UK. And there's this thing that goes on every year, folks. It's pretty big in Norfolk, and that is the Royal Norfolk Show. And it's been drought conditions here in the east of England pretty much. And of course, the one day it rains, Rebecca, is when my kids go to the Royal Norfolk Show for a school trip. So
have they got the wellies on? That's the thing, because it'll be muddy.
Yeah, you know what? I'm not sure. The ground is so baked dry. I'm not sure if it will cake up that much for wellies, but who knows? Well, we'll soon find out the state of their trainers when I pick them up after school today. So, Rebecca says that she is an unstoppable creative and mum to 3 amazing offspring. She may not call herself a geography specialist, but through her work, Rebecca has had the pleasure of drawing live at many events dealing with issues such as the climate crisis, and her passion is making those conversations accessible and memorable. And I have got the absolute delight and pleasure, Rebecca, to have been a feature on one of these graphic boards that you've done. It was so cool.
Yeah, it was great. So I draw live each year for Norwich Pride, and you were there, and that was awesome. So at Norwich Pride they have a talk which is focused on trans issues, and the speakers are from the LGBTQIA plus community, and it was just again a lovely thing to capture. All of my children identify as being part of that community, so for me to support that is a real privilege. And also it was really, I was listening differently again this year because some of those comments really resonated with what my family feel like. So there were some really cool kind of nuggets of information that I think were really poignant, and it brings a tear to my eye occasionally because some of the talks I draw live at are quite powerful.
Could be emotionally charged, I guess. Yeah, we'll definitely dive into that a little bit, Rebecca, because I mean, how you do what you do, you know, humans are not built for multitasking. So how you do what you do is absolutely incredible. To the attention, the creativity, the skill that you do is just mind blowing to me, and I can't wait for you to really describe that process a little bit later on. So before we get started, though, we've got to do the coffee and geography regulars, and let's talk about. Do you have a brew with you at all? Do you? What do you get?
It's water today.
Oh, me too, actually.
It's just been so hot. If you get offered a cup of tea, you're kind of like, well, yeah, but I mean, I had coffee this morning, but it's just been really warm. So, we can't complain, but we can complain because obviously it's the right time of year to be warm, but it's just been a bit warm for quite a while.
Yes. Yeah. It seems, it seems, I don't know what it is about us Brits. I mean, we're very good at both moaning, complaining and celebrating about the same thing at the same time. So it's like people say, oh yeah, it's hot. And then when it's like hot for just like more than 2 days in a row, people are like, oh, for God's sake, I want this heat to go away. And it's like, we're such weather moaners. But then again, you'd think for a country which has got such changeable weather, we'd be used to it. But I guess it's the same thing over and over again, which we moan about. What do you think? I mean,
I think that the reason that we and everyone who visits our country loves the fact it's green and lush is because we get a bit of everything, and we can't complain about it. Otherwise, we wouldn't have such gorgeous.
Yeah.
So we do need our sun and our rain and seasons, and that's what's lovely about living in the UK is you get to see all those versions of the same place.
Yeah, I have no evidence to back this up. This is completely anecdotal, folks. But I'm just wondering whether it is the same weather over and over again is what drives us nuts, because we are such used to changeable weather. You know, they usually say, you know, if you don't like the weather, wait 5 minutes. But So I don't know, but I'm just babbling on about. But it's interesting that you mentioned about the greenness. Because last year in particular, when we got that ridiculous heat and that dry spell, I never ever seen things so brown. I mean, it was incredible, really. And
A lot of fires, weren't there? Because
yeah,
it got to the point where it was like tinder. It was so dry, and I think that that's
that's where we're heading as well, isn't it? So, as you know, when you've documented, so as I've hinted at already, Rebecca, you're not too far away from me. You're kind of like East Norfolk, kind of like around the Norfolk Suffolk border there. So so are you kind of like round near Beccles, between Beccles and Galston, that kind of area, I think.
we are actually in Beccles at the
You're in
moment.
Beccles itself, yeah. So the question I always ask our guests is about their location, but not just about that, but about how has it made you as part of your identity? So kind of like, you know, is there a very strong kind of like Waveney Valley kind of vibe to you, or is there other places that you've been around the world or the UK which you've absorbed into your part of identity? So in terms of your location, where you are now, where you've been, Rebecca, what kind of like has made you as a person based on where you've been?
So I was born in Northamptonshire, so in the middle. But a lot of my family, and I've done my family history, and we literally are Norfolk. So
Right.
yeah, and I think that's both sides, whether my dad wants to know that or not. It's like I looked at my ancestry; it all seems to be from this side of the UK. And so obviously in my growing up, because we had family here, the beach was very important. So
Yeah.
the side is really important. But then I love going back into the Midlands and looking at those sort of slightly rolling hills. But then spent 12 years in Scotland, so yeah, the being up in the mountains is really important too. So I think the UK is great because we've got everything,
Mm.
and it's not too far before you get to a different type of landscape as well. In Beccles, we've got the river, and it's been great to have some fun on a canoe, and even we've got two dogs. We've got a puppy now, and she got on the canoe the other day. I don't know how she was. She was smart cows because we were down in Bungalow. There was like cows on the side, and she was kind of quite freaked out. But I think the thing is, people moan about everywhere they live. So a lot of my growing up was in like Great Yarmouth area and Galston, and people moan about it. But if you look for it, you can find some really lovely places in everywhere. We go down to London a lot for work, and there's little kind of secret hidden gems. You just got to look for them and stop the moaning, really.
Yeah, in fact, it's interesting you mentioned Great Yarmouth because it's Great Yarmouth is a really weird place because it seems to get a bad rap, and there are quite a lot of challenges, of course, there in Great Yarmouth, especially after the decline of the ship in the dock, the fishing industry, and all that kind of lot back in the day. And it's kind of never really fully recovered. It very, very heavily relies on tourism quite a fair bit. And to that respect, I remember because I originally from Harlow in Essex, and we were constantly coming up to Norfolk for our holidays. It was always Great Yarmouth or it was Hunstanton, places like that. It was our go-to place. It was accessible. It was only an hour and a half away. And I used to love coming to Great Yarmouth as a kid. I used to love going to the pier, and of course, it's not Pleasure. It's a Pleasure Beach, is it? I think, yeah, and all that kind of stuff. I used to love it, and but yeah. So you say there are some hidden gems, then. So let's give Yarmouth and Galston, that area, a bit of kindness. What would you say people come into Yarmouth or think about Yarmouth to say, right, look, folks, forget everything you've heard. Check this out. Go look at this. Go on this walk. Have a look at this thing. What would you say, from your experience, would be something that people should look for, that hidden gem? And there's Poppy.
Sorry.
Hi, Poppy. Poppy
So
may interject. So that's Poppy's opinion, folks. Let's hear Rebecca's opinion.
So I mean, obviously, the main thing is two main things I'd say about the coast in Norfolk. So obviously we've got coast, and there's a lot of it, and there's different types of coast. So you've got the bit that's very commercial, where you can have lots of fun, and you can get silly souvenirs and candy floss rock, that sort of thing. and lovely donuts. But then you've got the coast, which has got all the wildlife. And so the second thing that I would attach to that is the skies. I mean, we get the most amazing skies. Obviously, because we're on the east coast, we don't get the sunset. But if you're up in the morning, you know, sunrise, and just the amount of birds you can see. So having lived in Scotland and with what I always call a lack of horizon, this is the place for the horizon. It's absolutely gorgeous. And you know, the Norfolk Broads, but Yarmouth has got some amazing architecture, and you know, a lot of that is obviously not in the best condition, but then also is, you know, it's very accessible to go and see places. We've got some amazing museums, and Gorleston Beach has had work done that in the outer harbour in Yarmouth, which has made the beach more than double in size. So it's one of those beaches that if it's a nice day and you get there, you will not struggle to find somewhere to be and feel like you're not too close to somebody else. So it's absolutely those things. And I think, like you say, people that visit see it differently, and I think that's a bit like if we've been involved in theatre. My husband worked in theatre, and people who know theatre don't get to enjoy theatre properly because they understand what's going on backstage. So the magic, and I think that happens with coastal towns. If you live there and you see it when it's like raining like this or it's cold, and I mean, living in Norfolk when I was a child, I remember that the summer was so different for the winter, because in the winter and everything got boarded up, and then in the summer it all sprang back to life again. And I think that's what we as residents see that the tourists don't see. And it does tend, and you know, and if you're having to work and do the boring stuff like shopping and looking after kids and going to school, all those boring things, you don't love a place the way someone does that gets to come and sit and enjoy it and, you know, have a holiday. So it's always going to have that feeling. But I think if you look for it, you know, we've got some great independent shops, we've got some lovely restaurants and bars and things. So yeah, just got to look for it.
One of my best hikes, my favorite hikes I went. I mean, you were talking about the big skies. I mean, one of my favorite places in the world is Montana, where my wife's family have a place out there, and I've talked about it a lot on this podcast. And of course, Montana is the big sky state, and I keep saying to people when I go and visit, I say, you know, if you ever come and visit us in Norfolk, we are effectively the UK's version of the big sky, because we are a large county, and we have undulating landscape, but it's very low lying, and so you can see skies. And you're absolutely right, Becca. When you look over that North Sea, especially during the morning, it's gorgeous, absolutely gorgeous. On a very clear day, you can see Scroby Sands wind farm from Yarmouth and Gorleston Beach, stuff like that. And so the hike, to circle back, I've done lots of hiking in mountains and things like that, but one of my favourite hikes is that we hiked from our doorstep in Norwich. This was pre-kid days. My wife and I walked out from our doorstep in Norwich, just up the top of Ketts Hill, and then we walked along the Thorpe Road, and then we kind of went through Little Plumstead, and then we went out that direction. So we kind of then, and the only place you could cross, you know, was either Reedham Ferry or Acle Bridge. So then we came down to Acle, back up again, and then we ended up at Gorleston, staying at a campsite in Gorleston, and then coming back down to Yarmouth, spend the day in Yarmouth and getting the train back. And it was delightful. It was such a fantastic hike. And so I completely get everything you've mentioned there.
We've been enjoying the canoe, and I mean, canoeing through Norwich is just, you see Norwich completely differently. I would recommend to anyone. It was incredible. The bridges and the dates on those bridges and the little markings of where floods and things happen. I mean, history and everything there. It was just incredible. But being on a canoe, so we were recently out near Bungay, and on the canoe there, it brings you even lower. So you've got this lovely kind of edge of the reeds and all the wildlife that's in there, and then just huge skies. So
right, before we move on from the location, I've got a question for you, right? Because I've never been to this place, and you're probably going to be shocked that I haven't, bearing in mind where we live. But I have heard that the Beccles Lido is legendary. Is this true? So what is the Beccles Lido, and why would people think that it should be the done thing, especially if you've got kids?
So Beccles Lido is an outdoor heated swimming pool, and it's right on the edge of the river. So you're like it's like swimming in the river but not being in the river, and it's very deep, the deep end. It's quite scary deep, actually. So you can actually jump in and dive into this pool, which is quite rare these days because a lot of pools don't let you do that.
Yeah.
And yeah, so you can be in that swimming pool when it's gorgeous sunshine, but it's also when it's, stormy or whatever. So you get that lovely outdoor feeling of swimming, but obviously it's in a heated pool. So it's not hot.
Yeah.
But no, it's really nice. And very, as I say, right close to the river. So you're getting all the kind of bird life and, dragonflies and things as well. So really sweet location. But Beccles is gorgeous. And we went, there was an art festival in town, and the tower is something that you can go up, and it's part of the church, but it's not actually joined to the church. So it's like a separate building, and the views from the top of there, you can see the wind turbines out at sea.
Oh, amazing.
A long way away from where we actually are.
Yeah.
And it's got one of those little maps that tells you what it is you're looking at on the horizon. So yeah, and it was affordable to walk up. It was quite high. Coming down was quite nerve-wracking because it's a little twisty kind of spiral stair. But and you can see the Lido from the top as well. So if you're in Beccles and you do the Lido, I suggest you do the tower as well.
Yeah. Because Norfolk's got quite a good reputation for that kind of thing, because you can sometimes go up the church tower in Haysborough.
Yeah.
Which is brilliant because if you're a geographer, you've got all that coastal processes taking place and the erosion stuff. And you can also go up the church tower in Ranworth on Ranworth Broad.
Yeah, I've been up Ranworth, and we've also been to the top of the church tower at Winterton, which I'm not sure if that's open to the public.
Oh, yeah.
A mural at Winterton School, which is a view of the coast, and it's in the school hall. And part of our research was to go up to the top of Winterton. But there's some very cool graffiti sometimes at the top as well, like very cool graffiti.
Yeah.
And which we would not, say to do that now, but it's worth going and having a look, because some of it's not just very old, but the handwriting is very different to the graffiti we see.
Yeah. So, yeah. Isn't it amazing how you've got like basically the equivalent of, I don't know, Banksy was here, but from like the 16th century or something, or 17th century. It's just
like, you Banks.
You Banks. Oh, right. Good. I think we've definitely got a good sense of that. If you were ever thinking about visiting Norfolk, I think you've been given loads of reasons to do so. Now, right, fantastic. Okay, I want to talk about your work, your graphic recording work, because it is fantastic. I just want to picture the scene, everybody, because Rebecca mentioned it already. For Norwich Pride, year before last, I think it was. It was the first one after COVID, I think, wasn't it? I'm sure. It was last year. Oh my God, how time flies. Okay, so for Norwich Pride last year, I was invited to speak at the Q&A debate panel thing, which was fantastic. There was you had Lee was there as my friend, who's a trans man. I can't remember who else was there, but there were all of us were either gender non-conforming, non-binary, or trans. And it was a Q&A kind of discussion about the way things are going, the kind of like how media is portraying this political climate, but also what's good, what affirms us, what's joyful about being trans, all that kind of stuff. And what was so interesting for me, Rebecca, I don't know if I've ever told you this from my perspective, but there's me and these three other people with Joe Caulfield at the front on the stage. We've got this audience in front of us, and then you are to our right, the panelist's right, with this giant board and all these coloured pens, everything like that. And I don't think you ever once stopped scribbling. Now, this is what went through my head, right? There was a couple of times when I missed what somebody else was saying, or I had to think of the question carefully because I didn't quite catch it, or I might have even misanswered questions because I didn't quite catch them, because I always had half an eye on what you were doing, because I was so fixated, subconsciously if not consciously, on what you were doing, and I was so amazed at the speed that you worked, the accuracy that you worked, and I just kept going from my mind as I was trying to have this audience debate and everything for everybody, like, how are you we are talking at pace and at deep things. How are you doing this? It is incredible. I mean, I don't really know what question to ask you, Rebecca, apart from saying, what's the pro for? First of all, describe what you do. Describe what you do, and then try to explain to us the process of which you do it, because it is just fantastic.
So I go along to events and conferences, and like you say, I have a very large. It's like we call it a graphic wall, but it's basically a massive easel. And on the occasion of Norwich Pride, it's covered in paper. It can be other things. It's paper. And I'd listen and draw live to try and capture some of what you say. Obviously, it's not like a transcribing thing. I'm not getting word for word, but I'm trying to capture some of the important points, some of the anything emotional. So if people laugh, cry, get angry, whatever, I want that on the board, because I'm there to support the communication of what's being said and help people remember it. So so my process is basically I'm having to listen and then sort of distill the important bits and then turn that into visuals and kind of the words that I capture. I'd say there's colour involved, and it's all about engagement and accessibility. So I usually represent the person in the room that knows the least about the subject, and sometimes these subjects are very complicated. So a lot of science, do a lot of business, and they're not my field. So I have to listen well, and I have to, the people who talk are communicating well, and I'm just catching and capturing and trying to show what's been said.
I've when I first saw you do that, and then I've like been paying attention, and I managed to go round the Norwich Science Festival. I didn't catch you when you were there, but looking at all your stuff from the Norwich Science Festival as well, and as you know, I kind of like try to describe it for the podcast on location. I don't think I did a great job, but I'm a science communicator myself and an ex-teacher, so I know it takes effort, practice, working knowledge to be able to translate complex information into something that's not just digestible but accessible as well. And if I've got a working knowledge of something, I can probably do a good enough job communicating it. And but obviously my bag is mostly climate science because I've got the background on that, and I know how much complex that information you've got to distill, because there are so much nuances and factors involved in climate science, which I don't think a lot of people realize. And then you've got to pick and choose. So for someone to come in as a non-expert, but to be able to communicate it in a way for non-experts to understand, that is some talent and some skills. So what's my question leading on from that then is, was there a time when you stepped back and looked at what you did a little bit with awe and thought, wow, and where you went, I have learned so much just by doing this?
I think the work that we put up for the Science Festival was many years of graphic recording at a science cafe that's held. Well, it's finished now. But
I didn't think you did all of them in one science festival, Rebecca, somehow.
No, but what was really nice about that was so I sat and actually did digital redraw of all of those so that it was a better resolution to have them printed for the exhibition. So I actually revisited every bit of work that I'd done over, say, it was many years worth of work. Right. And what was really nice about it was, as I was like opening up these documents I hadn't seen for a long time, I remembered the talk, and that's the whole point of the job I do. So I didn't invent this. There's people that do this all over the UK and all over the world. It's less big in certain places. In America, it's huge. Over Europe, it's huge. There's less of us here, but there's still a big community, and we're all very we're generous with each other. We share things. So in COVID, it changed how we had to work, because obviously we had to work remotely, and we figured it out together, and I'm really proud of our community for doing that. So that was really cool. But revisiting that stuff, I was like, I remember what they said. And then so to have it exhibited at the Science Festival, it stood alone without. So normally I'm supporting the speaker, and the work is the kind of the collaboration that they often didn't expect to be involved. They just were going to present, and it's being captured in these drawings. But it was quite a test to see how well that stood up on its own without even me there to explain or the speakers. So that was quite cool, and the feedback was really positive from that. But yeah, I think I'd be really good at a pub quiz with general knowledge, a little bit about a lot of things. But I think the two main skills that I have, apart from the drawing skills that came from, obviously I went to university and I studied art, and that's my thing. But listening is so important in what I do, but also being interested, and a good speaker will do that anyway. So I'm interested in all these things and I don't know enough about these things, so I'm listening in a way, but I'm always listening in a different way to the rest of the room. So I always describe it that if it's like a business event, and if they were going to talk about redundancies or promotions, somebody else in the room's listening to see if they've still got a job or they're going to earn more. Whereas because I'm impartial, I'm listening in a disconnected way, and that's really helpful. But it's fascinating, and a lot of what I do is in really powerful and important sectors. So I do a lot of work which has, a lot of talk at the moment to do with climate change. Throughout COVID, there was a lot of talk about obviously the science in that, and also education and how educational reform, that we were trying to, make things better. So yeah, you kind of come away, and a lot of the time it's a bit of feeling a bit reassured that you're quite glad there's a whole massive team of people that are dealing with these things that care about. So it's mostly positive is the feeling. Occasionally, obviously, with the climate, you do come away feeling, oh crikey, we've got to pull our socks up and we've got to try and do. But most of it feels positive because the people who I listen to are so enthusiastic and so passionate about what they do. I don't know if I've just gone completely away from that.
No, it's however you take it. I mean, and I think what really struck with me, what you said, was when you're communicating something, and you're passionate about it, and that's coming at it when you're so passionate and enthusiastic about a certain topic. So with me, it's LGBTQ issues, DEI, climate change. How do you stay not dispassionate, of course, but how do you stay on the level so your communication effective? Because as you saw from that talk last year, I could get very passionate, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. But of course, if the more enthusiastic and passionate you are, the greater that your emotions and your inherent biases can then manifest outwards. And that, for me, in terms of communication, is one of the hardest challenges. How do I communicate about the climate crisis, for example, without giving an emotionally charged piece of information?
I think people respect the passion and they respond well to it. And I don't think you'd be standing in a room with being the only passionate person in any of those subjects.
I agree.
So people will align to you and will recognise their own feelings in what you say. With me, I try to stay impartial. It usually isn't a problem. There's been a couple of times when I've heard things that I felt I didn't align with, but most of the people I work with, I choose to work with.
Sure.
Especially with the causes I support, I'm supporting them because I align with them. So
yeah.
I try to represent their feelings and do justice to what they're talking about. I mean, I've presented at education events where they put on a motivational speaker, and they are people that either I'm aware of. So one example was a young man who, as a child, had suffered with a stutter and had help, and he's quite famous now as a speaker. And I very recently, before the event, someone had shared it on LinkedIn, his story. And then when he walked out on the stage, I was just like, oh, you're joking me. This is going to be really difficult to draw because I'm going to cry. And I got through it. He's amazing. And, and he's obviously sets an example to anybody who has barriers to their kind of getting on with normal kind of everyday life. And it was an amazing thing to see. And I kind of got through that part of the event. And then later on, they brought another speaker out, and it was his blinking teacher.
Oh no!
Again, but So, but the thing is, with my work, what I try and do is have the work represent what the audience has seen that day. in the early days of work, I tried to research everybody beforehand, so I'd have some prior knowledge. And in one case was this guy who was streaming in live from America, an educational event, and I was like, oh, it was a leadership event, sorry. And I was like, right, I know exactly what he's going to say. This is going to be fine. And the internet, I mean, this is back in, I don't know, 2016, 2017. The internet connection was rubbish. It went down. The screen went blank. Everything changed. And his whole talk, basically, he scrapped it. And when he got the connection back, he talked about all of that being important. And he used that to just ad-lib a whole new talk, and it totally threw me. But then I just drew what I heard and truly listened properly. And then I realized, at events, often they send out written notes, they'll give you the slides and access to presentations, but there's a lot of stuff, incidental stuff that happens that I'm there to capture. So I don't have to worry about getting word perfect on, and accurately drawing whatever charts up on the screen. Because by capturing what happened, and so what I did, I drew a little kind of on air sign above him, because it was like a nod to the fact that he got cut off, and it was really live, and other things I drew in that talk, and I can still see it now. So that's how effective it can be, because I can remember what I drew, and I can visualize the image. But yeah, it taught me that I walk into every event with basically the title of the talk, and that's it. They don't give me. So I'm drawing it as it happens, and what you hear as the audience member should be what you see there as well.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, it's
very precious. But I do.
Yeah, but I tell you what. But I would argue, Rebecca, that even someone taking minutes in a meeting, that dry standard secretarial kind of stuff that people do, I've done it, everyone's done it, that is challenging in itself. And I always think, have I written that down right? Have I put the right person down? All that kind of stuff. So I think you can be forgiven for having but what doesn't get recorded? I made the mention of minutes on purpose, because what doesn't get recorded is or at least not often, is the sentiment, is the feeling in the room, is the atmosphere. It's when you look back at minutes, you're really just trying to find out, oh, okay, did I mention about this field trip, or did this, whether this what the coach fee? Very logistical, very dry, very, no humanity in it at all. When you look at your stuff, you get the sense of what the atmosphere was like in the room. You get the sense of what emotions some people were feeling. The way that so for the Pride one that you did for us, and I was really intrigued to see, because I speak a lot, as everyone knows, but I was really intrigued to see what the kind of quotes that you picked out from me, and there was a lot of focus on hope and being resilient and identity and things like that. And I felt that for everything I said, all the word salad, all of the word diarrhea with my ADHD brain comes out with, you captured the essence of what I was saying. And I just want to say, thank you for putting this huge talent that you have to such positive use. It really does mean a lot. Hi folks, a chance for you to recharge your brew, but also a polite prod to remind you that it's so easy to support this podcast. Simply liking, sharing, rating and reviewing means that it will get on more people's radar. Also, there are a few links down in the description which may be of mutual benefit. Please do check them out. Your website is great. We'll put your website on the show notes. I know, Paul, your partner does things as well on the technical side of things, which is great. You're a good team. But you've got on your Twitter feed, you just need to scroll down your Twitter feed, and it's you in action doing things, of course, but you've got little snippets of the bits that you've taken. And I'm just you've got a little person holding a pot plant with AI question marks. Should we let robots do the work? Now, I can only see that little bit of that whole canvas that you've done. But now I'm thinking, hang on a minute, that's opening up all this discussion. Okay, and artificial intelligence, are we talking about farming, growing vegetables, are we talking about, should it be automated? And it opens up a whole stream of conversation, a whole stream of questioning. And so you can take the canvas that you have written and you can spend hours going to town on it, either what someone has said or what might have they said or what questions does that lead to. But it's so engaging and so brilliant that anyone can pick it up. Youngsters, people like me, anything.
This is it. So in terms of accessibility, it should, obviously it crosses the kind of, from the most novice person who knows nothing to the expert should all be able to access it. Other things, so language with the visual side of it, and there's more simplistic kind of language rather than the jargon. It obviously opens it up to people who perhaps have English as an additional language.
Yep.
So that side of it, but also, so imagine somebody who, so one of my science cafe regulars when I was drawing at that event was somebody who's hard of hearing. So he would, like you were saying, you miss stuff. He would miss stuff because of the fact that the microphone speaker thing just wasn't good enough for his hearing aid.
Yeah.
And so he was missing part. He was trying to catch up all the while with what was being said. And he got to the stage where he knew to come and see me because he could say, oh, that's what they said. Oh. And I thought, yeah, this is another side I perhaps didn't appreciate. So when people go to events that are either spoken or maybe there is sign language interpretation, both those things are very transient. They've gone, to the next thing, the slide's gone, the person stopped speaking. But having it captured the way I do it allows people to reflect back on it. Often at coffee, they'll go and stand around and say, oh, do you remember this? Or that's right. And then they'll take these photographs of the tiny little snippets, and often we'll share them online, and then expand upon that and say this is what was being said because they remember what was around that little comment. And then that's how it's used. And you were talking about like the written notes, but the minutes. But who reads that? No, only read minutes because they're going to go to the next meeting, and they've got, oh shoot, what did I say I'd do?
Yeah, the minutes are just for the next meeting.
These are ways that you can send these out to everybody that was there to help them remember, and people that weren't there. And just so I've used what I do in all sorts of settings. I've used it in schools. I've done revision walls. So I've worked with a school in Norwich doing revision walls on the English texts. So
amazing.
I worked with the class, so the class decided on that, and that's a real powerful tool because the ownership then, and when there's, especially when there's children involved, the ownership there is incredible because they'll pull parents over and say that's me.
Yeah, I said that. Yeah.
I had a young man at a school in Norwich, so I do sometimes do career stuff. And what happened with that, it was like a round table. They went around visiting different business people, and then we introduced me to the situation, and they would then come and talk to me. And had one part which was, what are your top tips? So it was a way of them, again, it's a bit of, we're forcing them to do a bit of revision because they're having to think, what was that thing? And then they start listening for something because they want me to write something for them. So they listen more actively as well. But then in the next part of it, I talked to them and asked them what they'd like to do when they were older. And then I drew them in, like, as a silly cartoon drawing, but in whatever this role was, and asked them about how to get on that career path, how they thought they might go about that, so what subjects they might want to study. And I had a young man who had recently moved to the UK, and his English wasn't as good as it might have been, and he had some issues because the children didn't necessarily understand what his name was because it was an unusual name in North for them to say. And his ambition was to be a Bollywood star, and I really, really hope he does, because it's cool. So I had to draw this kind of like Bollywood sign and drew him, and then I asked him about how to spell his name, and he said he wanted the pen off me and communicated that he wanted the pen off me, and he wrote his name in I think it's like Arabic. I'm sorry if that's wrong, but I think that's what it was.
So Urdu or something like that, yeah.
So he wrote his name, and then he pulled the kids over and went, "That's my name." And I was just like, "Wow, that's
nice.
Like powerful.
How empowering!"
Yeah, and do have another story about that particular school where I was talking to one young boy, and I said, "What might you be?" And he said, "I'm either going to be a chef or a footballer." And I was like, "Okay, so will we draw you as a chef or a footballer?" And he said, "Oh, a footballer." And I said, so why do you think that? Then he said, because Norwich City keep phoning my mum. And I was like, what do you mean Norwich City keep phoning my mum? He said, they want me to go and join this thing and they keep phoning. And I was like, okay. So I called the team who I was working with, and I said, you might want to have this conversation, because obviously this child thought Norwich City was phoning all these children now. Obviously they'd headhunted him, but it was being missed by school, and said, I think I'll sort that out. He may be one of the new stars of the football world, but that's so the power of having that interaction, and them being able to, the young people being able to see themselves represented and have that engagement was a really powerful tool.
Yeah, and what a way to be represented. I mean, I remember with Glee, seeing the little character of me. And there are so many photos on Twitter that you post where you've got the subject like pointing to themselves on what you've done, and they've got like this beaming smile on their face, like, that's me, that Rebecca's fit on there.
The avatars on
and they use it for their Twitter profiles or something like that. So question for you, and please feel free to answer this however you feel comfortable, is that one thing that struck me. I'm just looking at the video you took of the one of the pride one, and I just realized you drew a starship from Star Trek, from something that I
I thought I better have it up, and it does say, I think it was your quote, your queer
space queer family. Yeah. Oh, that's it, because you captured my geekiness as well and my reference. But so I immediately knew. I mean, not the fact that you were there, you were happy to do, the pride talk and stuff like that, but I immediately got the sense that you were like a strong ally to the LGBTQ community. And then I later learned that you've got family members, and you talk about representation. So, and of course, we know that things. We don't have to talk about the politics and stuff like that, and the moral panic, of course, because that's quite tangible for everyone to see. But just really wanted to find out from yourself, from your point of view, about someone who is got people in the game with this, about how it's so important to have this positive communication the way that you do for folks like the LGBT community, the trans community, because from the bottom of my heart, Rebecca, it's what you do is powerful, and I find it very affirming, as a trans person. So, but I just really wanted to get your take on it from your personal point of view, and of course you can say as much or as little as you so wish.
Well, I mean, I have to say, first and foremost, they're my children. So,
of course,
when you have children, what you should feel is unconditional love, and you love them before they're born. So you love them before you know who they are, let alone they know who they are. So your biggest kind of concern is they're going to get here safely, and then you're worried about how you're going to look after them and how you're going to do all those things that you've, especially with your first child, is like, how am I going to train this child? How am I going to get
yes,
all these things that seem massive, and now you look back and go, that was nothing. Try having a teenager, and so when you bring these children into the world, you hope that you're part of their team. And you need them to have this team of people who are going to be out there looking out for them. And then when you have children who perhaps don't fit into a conventional norm, you realise there are people who aren't just not on the team, they're like against them. And that's horrible. And it's a very difficult situation to be in as a parent, because you want them to have the easiest life, but that might not necessarily be their life. And so, you've got to be an ally, because otherwise you switch sides, and I think, one of the powerful things that came out working with Norwich Pride, I did a talk I think it was the previous year or maybe one before, and somebody said, how do you be a good ally? And it's like, you come out as one, in the same way as somebody might come out and talk about their gender or their sexuality. We need to be vocal about how we feel. Other people, you hear it all the while, people will they'll test the water and see if they can make jokes to try and understand how you align. And I think you have to be very, very visible about how you align, and to say, no, that's not acceptable.
And
if we all just wanted the best for each other, the world would be such a better place. Because realistically, what you do in your life has no effect on me. But if you're happy, it will make me feel happy, because like that's how the world should work.
Yeah.
And I don't personally understand people being offended by other people, because it's, apart from somebody who's being nasty, why would I be offended by you? It's like, it has nothing to do with me. But you being unhappy offends me, because that's how I feel. That's how.
Yeah.
My children are lush. My husband's saying they're lush. And do you know what? They are, like, in so many other ways, they are growing and they are changing, and as they come into experiencing other things, that is going to change again who they are, and we're all like that. You might think, oh, I don't like that kind of food, and then somebody makes you an amazing dish, and it questions how you feel about things. And I think that is how life is. You have to be exposed to things to know if you like them or you don't like them, and we all should see that as we're all living documents. We should all be growing and changing. And we shouldn't have those strong negative feelings, because the world is a rich tapestry of all these kinds of people and all these amazing cultures and everything like that. And I think with being able to support the LGBT, I have to try and say the whole thing, the LGBTQIA plus community, I think that's how it sounds at the moment. We've worked on we worked on several things, but we've just worked on a really powerful piece of we do animation as well. So a piece of research that's come from University of Birmingham, which focuses on a certain part of that community and their experiences. And it's really powerful work for us to work on. We are, very privileged to be a part of it. And it makes us and our children look at our situation and see how lucky we are and how fortunate we are to have each other. And it makes us better parents, because we're going to go, we would never do that. And we understand other people's parents are doing and saying things, and it makes you get kind of cross. I feel like a mum to everybody, because I don't know, it's difficult. When my children were little, I always described them as being like Barbie and Ken. It's like, you've got building underwear. I don't need to know. I'm focusing on what you do with that part of you. As long as you're eating properly and you're kind to other people and you're happy. I mean, the mental health is so important, and I know most people would do anything for their children, but half the time, or maybe more than that, all you've got to do is just be okay with them in what they want to do. Our youngest is trans and literally left school the other week, and now we have blue hair and a piercing here. And I was more worried about the piercing there than I was about like anything else. So I was just like, please let that be okay. Please let that, nothing horrible happen with the piercing on the nose. But and so sometimes when we have conversations and one of them will make an announcement or whatever, and that we have to remind them that our concerns are at a much lower level. They're like, have you eaten? Have you slept? Are you well? Do you have enough money to get home? As parents, we're working. You can make an announcement and come out with something, but we're really still on that level of, are you still okay? Are you okay?
Yeah. That's nice, dear, but I asked you, what do you want for dinner?
Yeah. No, it's like, no, go inside of your bedroom.
Go inside your room.
Bring these glasses downstairs. So,
one of my favourite movies ever was Juno, starring Elliot Page, and the reaction that the parents have to the main character, like disclosing, I'm not going to spoil it, but disclosing the news was so brilliant, because they were like the Elliot's character sat parents down and said, I've got something to tell you, and then came out of it and they went, oh, thank heavens. Oh, well, I thought you were going to tell us this. I was like, I was like, yes, that's what we need. So
when our eldest told us about themselves, and I just went, oh, I forgot to go and buy rainbow toothpaste. Like, most of my job will just stay the same.
Just logistics.
Like, what am I going to do? Okay.
Yeah.
Not to dismiss it, because like, but the thing is, like, when you have children, it's like planting a seed or having a little project. You're waiting to see what happens. And the best thing to do is just enjoy it, because, it's almost like a mystery seed that you've got, and you plant in a pot and you don't know if it's going to be
a good way of putting it.
Flower, and if it's going to be a vegetable, if it's going to be, do you know what I mean? You just don't know. And so, of course, some of us, we want to influence them. So we show them the films we love and the music we love.
Oh, you've now got a pruning analogy.
No, there's the ones that climb up the wall or drive you up the wall. I think it's more okay.
Nice. I love how Paul is interjecting every now and then. I'm gonna hook on that as a segue, right? Because we're coming to the end now, but I don't want to let this one go. What is this? Spill the beans here, Rebecca. What is this about a team from NASA gate crashing your wedding?
So when Paul and I were younger, so we got married when we lived in Scotland, and it was a time, and believe me, that's been a very long time, where we didn't have a lot of money. So I decided, beyond that part, I decided to stay home with my children. So we were living off one income for a very long time. So we've always been kind of a bit, frugal and creative with how we've done things. You can ask my children about this. We did a lot of crafts and things at home, a lot of walking in the, for days out, because it's cheap. But when we got married, we were obviously on a budget. So we got married in our garden in Scotland. And it was the 1st of July, and in Scotland, like in England, that would be fine because you'd probably get a nice day. It was overcast and cloudy. It wasn't, what it could have been. But anyway, so we did it in the garden, and it was lovely. But we had like a bit of a pagan wedding. So we had hand fasting, and we built in all these quirky things that we really thought were funny and memorable. I think that's very us, actually. So we had we had a ceilidh. Paul worked at the theatre, so they put trussing up with a disco ball in the garden. It was
nice.
You'd have loved it. The ice cream man came, and everybody got a 99, and we just gave him 70 quid, and that was sort of pudding done. But it just so happened at that time, so where we lived, it was a place called Pitlochry, which is sort of central, just gateway to the Highlands, and there's a big hotel there, and they just happened to have a NASA conference, and this group of people, wherever they went up, there was a mountain behind us called Bennyvrachy, and it was somewhere we could go up, and it's an old volcano. You'll be Googling this after.
Nice.
But somewhere you can go up and walk, and it's beautiful. And I think they had perhaps been walking back from that walk, and there's just this group of people, and they were like, hey, an American accent, what's going on here? And we were like, oh, because by this stage it's quite late in the day, there's been a keg of beer, and that was another quirk. We had a keg of beer at the bottom of the garden. So we're like, come in, who are you? And they were like, oh, we're at a NASA conference. And I'm like, literally, that will be my claim to fame for the rest of my life, because I've been a bit of a geek. And so I hope this is how my head works. I hope somewhere they'll have a podcast where they're like, what's the weirdest thing that ever happened to you? And they were like, well, we went for this hike up a mountain, and then we happened to go past this crazy couple's wedding, and got pulled in and had a ceilidh. So
you may have even inspired some of them with their celebration kind of antics. It's like, we're going to do that ours when we have a celebrate. I don't know, with the next moon landing, let's have a ceilidh with some ice cream or something. I don't know. We can imagine. Oh, I feel I missed out now.
well, people have asked us to redo it because it's not a big wedding anniversary this year, but we'll have been together in October for 30 years this year.
Wow.
So
30 years.
We'll do ice cream and a ceilidh. I don't know.
It's been 20 for me and my wife. Right. Oh, right. This has been such a delightful chat, and I've loved Paul interjecting every now and then. Nice one, Paul. You got your honorary mention there. One last thing then is to link you back to our previous guest. We do a little thing called We Are All Geographers, where you've just basically got to talk for 30 seconds about a word that's been given to you for the last guest. Yeah, well, so what I did do, I started off by saying you've got to link it to something to do with geography, but then a lot of people found that challenging, not because they couldn't think of anything, but some of them, I guess, couldn't choose what to say because there was a lot to do with it. So basically, I've just turned it down now to say you can say anything about it for 30 seconds. Now, because you've got someone else because of this word, is quite cool. You've got someone in the room with you. You might want to be careful what you say, because the word that you've been given by my previous guest, which was the cartoonist and climate communicator John Cook, is the word cranky.
Ooh.
Now, because that's I don't know if you heard that, folks, but Paul just cackled in the background.
Growled. So I don't know if he's growling a word or. So obviously the word cranky can mean if someone's grumpy and miserable or whatever, but that's not what I'm going to talk about. So when we lived in Scotland, one of our houses was a tiny little bothy, which is just basically one bedroom and a kitchen and a lounge and a bathroom. But the village that it was in was a place called Killiecrankie. So Killiecrankie is a very beautiful part of Scotland in Perthshire, and it's a very tiny space, very tiny place. But the river comes through, and there's a very famous visitor attraction called Soldier's Leap, where apparently a soldier was being chased, and I'm not going to remember which side was which, but one of them apparently, to escape the charging soldiers behind, leapt over the river, and you can visit there. But it's very like there, and in the car park they have it measured out what this soldier allegedly leapt across. So that's the Soldier's Leap at Killiecrankie, which I would definitely recommend you go and see. But it's beautiful. There's waterfalls and loads of so the cut through of the river there is a glacial cut through. See, I've got all this geography going on.
There you go. You got your geography in there.
And it changes the height of this. The river in the valley changes because of a bit further down the river is a hydroelectric dam, and when they release this, because if there's been a lot of snow melt, they have to let the water come through. We live right next to the river, and we had constant white noise because literally we were next to the bridge. And when I say next to the bridge, if you Google Killiecrankie, you look at the bridge, it's a tiny little house next door, which was called the Gate House, and that's where we lived. And we actually, the person who lived there before us was a person, and his name was Andrew, but he was known as Black Andrew because he was so dirty, because he was an old shepherd and didn't wash.
Oh, okay.
He was constantly covered in coal and mess. And the reason he didn't wash is because he used the bath in the house as his coal scuttle. And that's what the person that we took over from, and we had to clean the house. But we got an amazingly cheap rent. We paid £100 a month to live there. But he only paid a penny.
Well, oh my God.
Because he'd been there for years and years. But this is at Killiecrankie in Scotland, so I don't know if I've spoken for long enough. But I suggest if anybody's ever going through, so it's on the main road on the A9 from all the way from Edinburgh to Inverness. Pitlochry is a beautiful place. Killiecrankie is a beautiful place, and especially in the autumn when the trees change colour.
I'd never ever would have imagined in my entire life that would have gone that way. That was amazing. That was amazing. I mean, John, I don't know if you're listening, but when you came up with the word cranky, you literally meant, cranky because of your Cranky Uncle app and like moodiness and something like that. But that has got to be, folks, and I've done, this is what, like 70 odd episode now, Rebecca, the most, and but testament to you, totally you, the most creative link and most coincidental link ever. Now I know why Paul laughed, because you were like, oh my God, this random word that this person came up with last happens to be one of the syllables in where we used to live. What are the chances?
Yeah.
So
I used to work for the tourist office when I was living in Pitlochry. So that was a really good job, because you get to kind of go and explore the region and then sell it to other people.
Sounds delightful.
I didn't have to sell. So my whole job was just making people's holiday better.
Oh.
Without it costing them any money. So you just had to know your stuff and share all the hidden gems. So that was, but I would definitely recommend, and that is the contrast of living in Norfolk to living somewhere like that.
Oh, I can imagine. Yeah, I mean, we're heading up to we won't be able to go that far north from Edinburgh, but we're heading up to just south of Edinburgh and Pennycook at the end of the summer to see some friends who used to live down here. Scottish, one of my best friends, Scottish, who's moved back up to that part of the world that he's from. So looking forward to that.
I was going to say, there's a very beautiful waterfall down on the borders. So as you're going up over the borders, I'm trying to think where it is now. It's near, like, off from Jedburgh way, I think. So yeah, and it's called Grey Mare's Tail because the waterfall as it comes out looks like the tail
Grey
of a
Mare. I'm gonna have to look that up. Thank you
go.
for that recommendation, folks around there. Go and have a gander. Now, before I forget, you've got to come up with a word for the next guest so that they can have a little bit of a chatter about.
So one term I use with my work is capture, but when I'm talking about capturing stuff, it's because it's the way I'm listening to it, and I have to catch the kind of good bits. So could you use?
We can go with capture. Yeah, that can be interpreted in many different ways. We'll go with capture.
I've talked about what I do is when people play a didgeridoo, they do circular breathing and I do circular thinking. So that's how I capture, because I have to have a thought here, a thought going in here, and a thought that's happening with my pen. So
I've never heard that. That's a pretty good term. I love that. Circular thinking. So lastly, so is there a couple of things anybody you want to give a shout out to, and please do plug yourself, where we can find you and your website and stuff. So those just the last two things to do now.
So I think shout out is to basically all our family and friends, because we've had a very busy year and it's going to get busier because we're going to move again. So
yeah,
all the people that are helping us and supporting us, and supporting Paul and I in what we do as well. We're in a very privileged position that we get to work with a lot of amazing people, and I'd just like to let me carry on doing it because I just love it so much. We do a lot of animations now, working with people like the NHS, and our messages are very important ones, and so we are very privileged. So a shout out to all those people we work with as well. Thank you for letting us be a part of these amazing projects. To find out more about me, obviously we have a website which is rebeccaosborne.co.uk. I'm on all social medias. You can find me. My Twitter handle is at Rebecca V Osborne, because my middle name begins with a V, and I think the other one was gone. And on Instagram, it's just Becca V Osborne, so it's BECCAV. But yeah, and that's it really. If anybody's interested in talking to me about what we do, or we're always really happy. We're both Paul's ex-teacher and I ex-supply teacher, or maybe not ex. Quite happy to go and do that again. We're very passionate about the two things that our main passions is the communication stuff, because it's really important, but also sharing our knowledge to help other people. We love to do that. We've got, like a lot of people, as you get older, you've got a lot of really important knowledge that is not always useful to us anymore, but would be useful to other people. So we were always happy to help other people get on with the things that they want to do by sharing what we've learned. So we work a lot of artists in Beccles at the moment. We've got a gallery space, and we're working with new talent and not giving them an opportunity to showcase their work, but also happy to talk to them about costing their work, how to get visible, and do things like make invoices and stuff like that sometimes isn't as well covered as it might be at college and university. So yeah, we're very passionate about I think there's a real maternal instinct to just make everyone happy and stuff. We've been fortunate enough to have other people who've supported us, and that's what we'd like to do, pay it back as well.
Well, Rebecca, I certainly get that vibe from you. That maternal caring instinct, and I'm so, and I mean this genuinely. Saying yes to do that Pride talk was the best thing about that, was coming across you and the work that you do. Really, I really, honestly, genuinely mean that. I mean, for me, as an empathetic person myself, like, I really do value social connections, cohesion, and stuff like that. And I enjoyed that talk. I do those kind of things quite a lot, but I'll always remember looking over to my right, seeing you scribbling down, capturing the moment, and just the joy that we all felt from seeing such beautiful color and our words represented in such a beautiful way. So thank you deeply, Rebecca.
To say that on that occasion last year, I had my eldest child with me, Dee, who was very helpful. Dee has worked with me quite a lot, and they're really good at finishing off what I've started if it comes to that. But there's a few things that I don't draw well, and Dee is very good at doing that for me.
Well done, Dee.
You know what I'm talking about, Dee, if you hear this. If I draw them, they look very wrong, and Dee's very good at making them look right. But Dee as well is a useful person to have on board, because they've got lots of, like all of us lot in the family, they've got lots of knowledge about things. So Dee's got a lot of knowledge about anything techie, but also as a non-binary person, Dee was helping make sure that the messages I was capturing were that there was some authenticity coming, because Dee was there as well. So it's a really good person to have with me.
Well, thank you for giving up so much of your time, Rebecca, and Paul, thank you for your little interjection as well, and Poppy, they were very, very welcome as well. So I hope to see you again soon, Rebecca. This has been an absolute delightful conversation. Thank you so much.
No problem.
Thank you so much for listening. We hope you had fun. If you haven't already done so, please subscribe so more stories and experiences can drop into your favourite podcast app. If you fancy being a guest or have any feedback, follow us on Twitter at coffeegeogpod and send us a DM. Or you could email coffeeandgeog@geogramblings.com. Until next time, keep geogging.